If you look up a list of the best comics of all time, an Image comic you'll often see appearing on various lists is Bryan K. Vaughn's and Fiona Staples' Saga. First released in March of 2012, Saga is currently 72 issues long, with more issues expected down the pipeline. As of recording this video, Saga has been ongoing for 14 years, and yet somehow, in my years of reading comics, I never checked it out, up until recently. This past month, I read all 72 issues of Saga, and I'm here to answer one simple question. Does Saga live up to the hype? Well, join me in this video as we take a spoiler-free deep dive into one of the most critically acclaimed series of the 21st century, as we explore why Saga is a sci-fi masterpiece. But before we take a look at the book, let's first talk about the creative team. In 1996, New York University undergraduate film student Bryan K. Vaughn enrolled in a workshop known as the Stanhattan Project. The Stanhattan Project was a university course made in collaboration with Marvel Comics and the New York University. The goal was simple. It aimed to provide students with real-life comic writing experience. When Vaughn attended this course, he submitted various works, and director of the Stanhattan Project and Marvel editor James Felder liked Vaughn's work, and so he gave Vaughn the opportunity to write a Marvel comic. That is how a college-aged Bryan K. Vaughn would receive his first ever writing credit as a published comic author with Cable issue 43. As Vaughn's career continued into the late 90s and year 2000, his resume grew, with Vaughn writing various comics for both Marvel and DC. This included titles like X-Men, Wolverine, Captain America, Batman, and Green Lantern, just to name a few. By the year 2001, Vaughn had a healthy number of author credits under his belt, but according to him, he felt like his career was coming to a close. Desperate to make something work and inspired by a bad breakup, Vaughn pitched an idea he had for a comic to DC's Vertigo department. His comic was removed from the world of superheroes, as Vaughn preferred to write stories about his own machinations. This pitch followed a male protagonist and his sidekick Monkey, as this character would navigate a world in which he was the last remaining male species on the planet. Despite Vaughn's self-admittedly ridiculous sounding premise, the idea was greenlit, and thus Y the Last Man was born. Y the Last Man was a commercial and critical success. Issue number 1 sold out upon its release in September of 2002, and Y the Last Man became incredibly popular, so much so that David Lindelof, producer and writer of the hit TV show Lost, invited Vaughn on to write for the show simply because Lindelof was a fan of Vaughn's comics. By 2010, Vaughn was a established and well-respected writer. He had several successful series under his belt, and he was a screenwriter for one of the biggest shows in television history. But Y the Last Man had ended, the Lost TV show had concluded, and his other comic series, Ex-Machina, was wrapping up. At the same time, Vaughn had become a father, and it was this newfound sense of paternalistic duty that inspired Vaughn to create the now iconic series known as Saga. According to Vaughn, Saga was an idea he had bouncing around in his head for decades. As a kid, Vaughn was in love with sci-fi adventure stories like Star Wars, Flash Gordon, and The Silver Surfer. When Vaughn was just a little boy who was bored in math class, he conceptualized Saga with those influences in mind. For decades, Vaughn had this idea floating around in his head, but he didn't have the follow-through to put it to pen and paper. Up until 2010, when Vaughn was a grown man and, more importantly, a father. That's when it dawned on him. The expansive, epic space opera within his mind didn't need to be told from the point of view of a grandiose protagonist. Rather, it could be told from a more relatable perspective. That is, the perspective of two young parents navigating life trapped in the middle of an uncontrollable conflict. Saga isn't a story about defeating bad guys and saving the day. Saga is a story about surviving, and it's about the moral ambiguity that comes with surviving. Nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes. What you view as pure evil, another person might view as morally righteous. But as with every comic, a writer is only part of the process. In order to bring his ambitious world to life, Vaughn would need an artist who had the ability to capture the expansive set pieces within his world. Enter Fiona Staples. Prior to meeting Vaughn and working on Saga, Fiona Staples Staples was an artist who had an impressive resume of mostly niche published works. Her first ever published comic was titled Amphibious Nightmare. It was released in 2005 as part of a 24-hour comic anthology series. Years after that, Staples would contribute comic covers for titles like Jonah Hex and Red Sonja, while also penciling titles like The Secret History of the Authority, and all the while she was simultaneously providing the line art and colors for other comics as well. Vaughn met Staples through a mutual friend. They got along, brainstormed some ideas together, and when Vaughn saw the incredible artwork Staples was able to produce, Vaughn immediately understood Saga was going to work. And when you read Saga, you get that feeling as well. Staples' artwork is truly unique. When you look at her art, you can't help but feel that Staples is a 21st century artist who utilizes digital tools to produce her pencils, inks, and colors in a way that stands out when compared to traditional comic book art. And you know what? The critics noticed that as well, as Staples would win dozens of awards that celebrated her contributions to Saga, including Eisner Awards for Best Penciler and Best Cover Artist, a Harvey Award for Best Colorist, a Ringo Award for Best Artist and Penciler, and that's just a few of them. She's won several different accolades. The creative team behind Saga is an absolute powerhouse. But what is Saga, and what makes Saga so good? Just as a heads up, I'm going to try to keep this video as spoiler free as possible. I'm going to cover some basic character traits and world building concepts, but I promise you, so many crazy things happen in Saga, my limited analysis won't begin to touch the surface when it comes to the epic ride you have ahead of you. And if at any time you haven't read Saga and you feel like purchasing Saga, you can pick up all the deluxe editions over at the channel sponsor, panelboundcomics.com, and you can use my code YUHU on checkout to save even more money. Anyway, the first thing that resonated me when it came to Saga was the world. The first few pages of Saga punches you in the face with how graphic it is. You lay witness to a woman giving birth. There's partial nudity, there's swearing, there's violence, and plenty more. It's immediately made clear from page 1 that Saga is a book made for an adult audience. What's great about that is that the swearing never feels forced, the violence doesn't seem over the top, and the nudity and sexual themes in the book look and feel natural. They're not overblown. So based on first impressions, the world of Saga is adult and shocking, but also earnest. Vaughn and Staples pull no punches, and a big reason for that is because of the publisher Image Comics. Vaughn and Staples have been very clear about the fact that the creator-owned nature of Image Comics' distribution deal makes it so that their book is fully owned by them, and no editor can force them to make a decision that they don't want to make. If you work for a company like Marvel or DC, there's a high probability that you'll have an editor who tells you what to do. Vaughn and Staples answer to no one. They create the story they want to tell 100% of the time, with no censorship. That's why Saga opens in such a flavorful way, and that's also why the world of Saga feels authentic. While the shockingly sharp synchronicities of the characters immediately grabbed my attention, the ideas that stuck with me were the ones about the enormous scope of this sci-fi universe. If you know me, I adore world building. When you read Saga, the world feels like it existed long before that issue, and it feels like it will continue to exist long after you put the issue down. It's very rare to read a comic where the sci-fi backdrop instantly feels this multi-layered. For a very brief background, Saga takes place in a galaxy where two planets are at war with each other. One is a technologically advanced planet called Landfall. It is the largest planet in the galaxy, and it's inhabited by winged humanoid folks. Landfall is locked in a decades-long war against its moon Wreath, a planet inhabited by horned, magic-wielding humanoids. Alana is a soldier from Landfall who fell in love with Marko, a prisoner of war from Wreath. The two both defect from their respective allegiances and choose to let love guide them through the galaxy. The book opens by showing us the birth of their child, Hazel, who has a unique combination of both horns and wings. Hazel is a radical act of love, and and with that, her mere existence is an act of resistance. Landfall and Wreath are in an endless battle of bloodshed, violence, and hatred. The conflict between these two planets has disrupted the entire galaxy, so much so that Wreath and Landfall export conflicts to other planets, looping in various populations from across the globe into a cycle of loss and agony. The fact that a woman from Landfall and a man from Wreath are able to look past culturally ingrained biases and see the humanity in each other is beautiful, but also deeply concerning to diplomatic leaders from both Wreath and Landfall. Soldiers, weapons, and territory win battles, but propaganda wins wars, and Hazel's existence is a testimony to how propaganda is failing on both sides. You can't have a love child floating around a universe who embodies the joint spirit of two mortal enemies. And so that is the struggle Alana, Marko, and Hazel face throughout the series. They have to keep their heads down, hide their existence, and stay out of trouble. All the while, Landfall and Wreath governments hire bounty hunters to erase their family's existence. There's so many beautiful themes embedded into the elevator pitch of the series. First and foremost, Vaughn chooses to showcase the destructive nature of intergalactic conflict through the lens of bystanders rather than soldiers. The fog of war makes combatants and loyal citizens overlook the abhorrent methods governments pursue in order to achieve victory. Our protagonists aren't trying to end the war by mowing down hordes of soldiers. Instead, they're trying to just live. But even then, survival, especially during times of war, is hard. Alana and Marko make decisions that aren't perfect. They constantly straddle a morally gray line, putting others in harm's way to fuel their own survival. It's a nasty business, but a potent reminder that life isn't perfect. We're the heroes of our own story, but we might as well be the villains in someone else's mind. Real quick, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. It goes a long way when it comes to helping out the channel and is much appreciated. Anyways, I love how Vaughn isn't afraid to showcase the ambiguity of conflict and survival. In Saga, morality is relative. And that premise reminds me how shallow a lot of mainstream comic titles can be. In Marvel and DC comics, superheroes traditionally fight bad guys who are unequivocally evil, but in Saga, even a bounty hunter who brutally murders people for money has a glimmer of relatability. Vaughn has a knack for humanizing even the most vile people by contextualizing their existence through universal experiences. Understanding that quote-unquote bad guys are driven by love, family, compassion, and community forces you to second guess a character's seemingly depraved disposition. The second underlying thematic through line that caught my attention was Vaughn's ability to subtly weave political commentary into the story. Emphasis on subtle. Our protagonists have the ability to hop planets and experience the cultures of different civilizations during times of war. This allows Vaughn and Staples to create unique and pluralistic societies. The massive sci-fi backdrop of Saga feels like it's defined by socio-political viewpoints just as much as it's defined by aliens, futuristic technology, and spaceships. Classism, homophobia, transphobia, cultural dissonance, abortion, sex work, PTSD, addiction, terrorism, and so many other topics are covered in this story, but it makes sense. There are a variety of different characters, so it feels logical that these different characters should engage with these themes differently, especially because they are uniquely influenced by the socio-political systems that raised them. For example, a character named Prince Robot, who's been raised in royalty and experienced combat, will suffer from severe PTSD, the same way a little girl who's sold into brutal servitude in a brothel will also experience PTSD. Both of these characters suffer from PTSD. The reasons for their trauma is really different, but at the end of the day, they share a humanistic drive when it comes to how to deal with their emotions. What I'm trying to say is that Prince Robot grew up in an aristocratic environment. His entire life has been about subscribing to bureaucracy and following rules in order to be the perfect prince. But once he experiences combat, it sends a shockwave through his system. The hierarchy of administrative power holds no weight in a battlefield. Instead, combat is about one thing: surviving. The cutthroat mentality this forces onto Prince Robot changes him, but it also heightens his relationship with sex. My psychoanalytical take is that Prince Robot constantly fetishizes the world around him and desperately wants to lose himself in primitive pleasures because it rewires the part of his brain that believes in hierarchy of power. When fighting in war, Prince Robot killed people and saw his fellow brother in arms die brutally. War is primal, and when in that primal state, the order of operations loses its meaning. It's no longer about bureaucratic structures, it's about killing people in order to survive till the next day. A person's animalistic instincts boils down to three main things: survival, nourishment, and reproduction. I believe that when Prince Robot engages in these wild sexual fantasies, he's tapping into the id, the same id that helped him survive on the battlefield. But at the same time, he's reclaiming himself from this horror by finding control and pleasure. Sex and survival are both major instincts that drive the id. Prince Robot survived the war and lost his sense of control and autonomy. Therefore, he reclaims that control and autonomy by having wild and freaky fantasies in which he has full control on the outcome of that fantasy. And in a twisted way, he's restoring his egoistic need to rationalize the importance of power structures by acting subservient or dominant in the bedroom. Because in the bedroom, he's driven by the id, the same id that was present during war. But this time, in the bedroom, he has control and he feels good. On the flip side of that, Sophie is a 6-year-old girl who works in a brothel as a slave. It's a twisted and dark reality that no one deserves to experience, but Sophie lives that life. Unlike Prince Robot, there's no reclamation of power in her services. Similar to Prince Robot, when Sophie engages in work, the drive of the id traumatizes her. Sophie is eventually freed from this captivity and ends up assisting a bounty hunter as she traverses the galaxy as a young and free woman. And while she lays witness and engages with a countless number of violent acts, the violence doesn't traumatize her. It reminds her of her freedom. These two characters majorly juxtapose each other, but neither of their perspectives feel incorrect. Rather, their decisions and motivations are uniquely guided by the powers that govern and shape their lives. And if you read Saga and watch this video, you might disagree with my interpretation of both of these characters, which is okay. That's why Saga is fantastic. Vaughn is able to distill so much nuance into this world without ever making it feel like it's in your face. And the fact that we can walk away from this book with different interpretations of characters is a testament to Vaughn as a writer. Like I mentioned earlier, every single one of these characters is humanized. Their struggles feel relatable, and their journeys are emblematic of interpersonal, social, and political hardships that we all can relate to. There is so much to unpack and analyze. So let's do that. Let's talk about the characters. We already talked about Alana and Marko, star-crossed lovers and the parents of Hazel. They are the main characters of this book, but they are also the closest thing Vaughn has to a self-insert. Like I mentioned earlier, Vaughn wrote this book when he had just become a father. Saga issue number 1 debuted in March of 2012. In 2026, Saga is still ongoing and on issue 72. As the years have gone by, we've seen Hazel grow up. We've witnessed the ups and downs of Marko and Alana's relationship, and we've seen how this family has grown closer in spite of all the noise and messiness surrounding them. Vaughn is a parent. He has children, he has a partner, and when you read this book, in a lot of ways, it feels like Vaughn is hinting at his own personal struggles with parenting and relationships. Maintaining a long-term partnership with someone isn't rainbows and sunshine. Partners argue, they disagree, they struggle to synergize and meet each other where they're at, and they hide parts of their lives from each other. Relationships aren't perfectly magical things that maintain with positivity 100% of the time. The relationship between Marko and Alana is raw and unfiltered in how choppy their connection with each other is. But in those beautiful moments where all these things fall into place and click, you can't help but grin ear to to ear when you see how infectious their love for each other truly is. And on top of all of that, they are young parents navigating life, trying to find the best ways to raise their daughter. There's so much that goes into parenting. You have to agree on communication styles. You have to adjust to the schedule of the child. You have to unlearn your own trauma in order to not bestow it onto your kid. You got to worry about providing for your kid materially. And you got to do a whole bunch of other things on top of that. Marko and Alana have to do all of that while on the run. And they're raising a child whose physiology is unknown to both of them. To Alana and Marko's knowledge, Hazel is the first of her kind. That's a lot of stress and responsibility to put onto these people, and when you read this series, you feel that pressure constantly. But perhaps what's most ingenious about framing the story of Saga through these three characters is that it offers any reader the opportunity to see themselves in these characters. A parent might see the soft and gentle compassion that Marko harbors as a clear reflection of their own status as a caretaker. Someone else might see Alana's blunt and against the grain style of communication as something that they might partake in. Or a younger reader might read the reflective narration boxes of Hazel and find that, just like her, they are self-aware yet constantly yearn for the past in a romanticized way. Saga has something for everybody, and all of the characters embody a character trait that any reader can relate to. Just a random fun fact, by the way, I found out that the character designs for Alana and Marko were made in heavy collaboration with Fiona Staples, as it was Staples who persuaded Vaughn to make Alana and Marko characters of color, which was another genius decision because, yeah dude, a lot of sci-fi stories take place in galaxies with seemingly infinite planets, and yet a lot of our favorite sci-fi protagonists tend to be white. The multifaceted nature of Saga's protagonists also continues to make the book instantly relatable. And that's not even mentioning the side characters. For example, the Will is a freelance bounty hunter who's hired to hunt down Alana, Marko, and Hazel. He is a hyper-violent, closed-off man shrouded in trauma and PTSD. He's plagued with addictions to sex and drugs, but he has love, and he yearns for that love. So much so that the memories of those he cares about haunts him in his quietest moments. Finding yourself engaging in destructive habits is something that most people can relate to. What's even more unsettling is how, when the dust settles, many people also find themselves recalling fragments of memories that made them feel good. That pungent, self-destructive ambiance of nostalgia is horrifying, but easy to romanticize. The Will's ability to embody that essence can make it easy for you to look past his appalling occupation. But then he'll do something terrible, and it hurts to see someone so broken continue the cycle by destroying the lives of everyone around him. But that is also a very relatable thing. Then you have a character like Isabel. She is the ghost of a young teenage girl who was killed during the war. Due to some plot machinations that I won't spoil, Isabel ends up getting entangled with Alana, Marko, and Hazel. Isabel is a character that can only exist in a universe like Saga. She is a lost soul who remembers the brutal conditions of the war that ended her life, and so in the afterlife, she wants to pursue opportunities that she was never able to. But the eternal pressure of her ghostly existence constantly reminds her that community makes life important just as much as experiences do. Her presence in the story is an ironic reminder to me that when you're gone and your memory fades, is it the material achievements that will define you, or is it communal bonds that allow you to live forever? Two more standout characters in this run are Upshur and Doth. They are journalists and also lovers, two gay men who work together chasing exciting stories and breaking news while also unfortunately living on a planet that hates gay men. These guys, like any good journalists, chase stories with massive headlines at the expense of their own safety. The pursuit of that next big story puts them on the trail of Alana, Marko, and Hazel, but simultaneously it puts them in ridiculously dangerous situations. The two main takeaways I get from these characters was first about the power of unwavering commitment. Just like Alana and Marko, Upshur and Doth are pariahs. Their love makes them a target, so they mask it. And Vaughn uses their explicitly gay relationship to provide a deeper commentary about institutionalized homophobia as a force that destroys people's lives. Upshur and Doth are an example for how even if you can mask in a heteronormative society, hiding a part of yourself from the world is a painful experience that no one deserves. The second aspect of their character arcs that stood out to me was how their pursuit of truth forces them to reckon with the notion of duty versus obligation. Is it morally acceptable to pursue a righteous objective if it puts others in danger? The answer to that question is nuanced, and so is their approach. And that's why I love them. They are a reminder that situational awareness and contextual reactions are extremely valuable skills that everyone should learn. The final character I want to briefly touch on is Petrichor. She is a prisoner of war, a horned Landfallian woman that we meet in a detention camp. She has so much hate in her heart because of the horrific state of being she's witnessed people engage in during wartime. Petrichor slowly unlearns this hate as the story progresses, but she's constantly reminded of the loss and pain she endured. It's a beautiful story about unlearning trauma by finding love, but also a stark reminder that progress isn't linear and a misstep can lead you back down the path you started on. On top of that, Petrichor is transgender, and Vaughn approaches this topic with respect and nuance. Petrichor's status as a transgender person makes her multidimensional, but it's not the sole aspect of her character that defines her. There is an intersection between her gender identity, her status as a Landfallian, and her PTSD that makes her voice unique. Her character progression is a reminder that we as people are complex, and it's important to have grace and self-awareness when understanding how different factors can control the outcome of your life. And there are so many other fantastic characters in this book. Vaughn always finds a way to balance the fine line between distinct but also sympathetic, even with smaller side characters who might only appear in one or two issues. And at its core, that is what makes the story of Saga so impactful. It tackles a massive array of contentious social and political topics by showing those viewpoints through its eccentric cast of characters. But alongside the beautiful themes and earnest characters, the final thing, in my opinion, that makes Saga a truly incredible book is the actual techniques employed by Vaughn and Staples that push the story forward. So let's talk about why Saga is a masterclass in comic book storytelling. I've read a decent amount of comics, and the one thing I notice instantly about comic book writing is the pacing of the story. Golden, Silver, and Bronze Age stories are dense. They are jam-packed with narration boxes and heavy expositional text. They can take a while to get through, but the end of each issue feels like a satisfying conclusion. One issue is one story. Jump forward to contemporary comics, and that isn't necessarily the case. Modern comic fans have coined the term writing for the trade because issues seldom feel like cohesive stories. Rather, they feel like a fragment of a story that will only be completed when read in the trade paperback format when all 6 issues are collected together. Saga is a book that doesn't quite fit into either of these binaries, at least in my opinion. Like modern comics, Saga reads quickly. The dialogue is snappy and the story flows. You're not going to read through a bunch of over-expository text like you would with a Stan Lee story. However, at the same time, each issue of Saga does feel like a story because there are so many characters in this book. Individual issues can focus on the individual circumstance of characters. Every issue ends on a cliffhanger and has you hungering for more, but at the same time, those individual issues are satisfying in a vacuum. The best way I can describe it is that every issue of Saga feels like an episode of a TV show, while every oversized hardcover edition feels like a season of a TV show. Looking at Vaughn's history as a writer for television, I feel like this comparison isn't coincidental. Vaughn isn't the first comic book writer to make a story that feels episodic, but he is one of the best examples of how consistent pacing and episodic storytelling can elevate the reading experience. Just like television, Vaughn also uses character deaths in this book to invoke heavy emotions from the reader. But death in Saga is never cheap. Sometimes it's sudden, sometimes it's brutal, sometimes it's slow and painful, but it's always heartbreaking. In Saga, characters usually don't die because of epic heroic sacrifices. Usually you'll read a book in which the main character or a side character can say their final goodbyes to their loved ones before they save the day. That doesn't happen in Saga. Rather, in Saga, characters just die. Almost every character dies without knowing that their most recent breath was their last. It's scary and unsettling and depressing, but it's also real. Death isn't predictable, and it often creeps up on you in the moments you least expect. What I also admire about Vaughn's writing is how it treats you with respect. Vaughn doesn't hold your hand and walk you through every piece of lore that he's dreamt up for his world. He chooses to instead let context clues do the talking. When characters talk to each other, they're not lore dumping. They're having real conversations that feel natural. Sometimes that conversation will mention a sci-fi concept that adds to the mythos of the world in a deeply transformative way. And sometimes those conversations will mention a concept with little to no explanation of what that concept actually is. That's my preferred style of writing. I hate it when characters go on a tangent explaining a key plot device in painstaking detail. It can often feel forced and unnatural, and that can ruin the pacing of a story. Vaughn's ability to cue the reader into important concepts while never making those explanations come across as tedious really impressed me when reading this book. But a sci-fi concept is only as cool as the art that illustrates it, and Fiona Staples' art is in a league of its own. Vaughn and Staples work together to make this world, and when you take in the art, you really get the feeling that Staples is creating art pieces from a place of passion. That's because Vaughn centers his writing style with a collaborative spirit in mind. For example, there is a massive spaceship the protagonists use to travel. The spaceship is a tree-based vessel. The reason for that is because Vaughn spoke with Staples, and after conversing, Staples told Vaughn that she prefers creating naturalistic concepts rather than symmetrical, uniform, futuristic ones. Realizing that the protagonists would be spending a lot of time in a spaceship, Vaughn ensured that his script allowed Staples to design a spaceship that was in line with the type of design she would enjoy drawing. Decisions like that make me smile. And more importantly, they impact the work in a positive way. If an artist loves drawing a story, every issue feels like it's their best. With Staples, that is the case. Staples' digital art style is instantly recognizable. Her faces are expressive, her character designs are bold and flamboyant, but they're always rooted in a sense of realism. Staples' backgrounds are also very carefully designed, and her coloring techniques seem to be defined by having a light white hue placed on top of everything, giving her pieces a soft and naturalistic feeling. Saga is a book where Vaughn and Staples are operating at 100%, never phoning it in. The reason for that, I'm sure, is because it's a creator-owned Image comic. Staples and Vaughn own the IP to Saga outright, meaning it's their baby. Having the freedom to create art with no restrictions allows them to experiment with their own techniques while always delivering fresh and exciting stories. However, the one con I have to note about Vaughn and Staples is that they take quite a while to release issues. Issue 54 of Saga was released in 2018. While issue 55 was released in 2022. So if you binge this series and you finish it and you want more, just know that sometimes the creative team takes breaks. But it's for the best. It's better to have them recharged and firing on all cylinders rather than forcing them to phone it in. What's cool about those breaks is that the characters continue to grow as real time passes. Hazel started out as a baby in issue 1, but by issue 72, she's 12 years old. As you read the book, and as these hiatuses happen, you still have the ability to grow with the family in real time. And I think that's beautiful, because at its core, Saga is about one thing. It's about the passage of time and the imperfect roads that people travel down. As human beings, imperfection is something that all of us can relate to. Saga is the book that demonstrates the nuance in those flaws, reminding you the beauty of life sometimes lies and those messy mistakes. But have y'all read Saga? What do you think of it? Let me know down below. And as a reminder, if you're interested in Saga or books like Saga, make sure to check out the channel sponsor, panelboundcomics.com. It's a website where you can get collected edition comics like omnibus editions, oversized hardcovers, standard size hardcovers, compendiums, and more at up to 50% discounts. And you can use my code YooHoo on checkout to save $2, or you can use my code YooHooShip to save 5% on an order of 4 or more books. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. I'll see y'all in the next one.